Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to RosieCon Book Festival 2021. I'm so excited that you could join us this evening. My name is Diane Rogers, and I am the school librarian at Ben Davis Ninth Grade Center in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm also the founding member and the steering committee chair for the RosieCon Book Festival. I'm so excited that you decided to join us tonight for our panel this evening called The Therapist is In. Tonight's author panel is the third in a series of virtual events, all based on the books and authors from the Elliott Rosewater, Indiana High School Book List. This is a recommended reading list of contemporary titles for teens in the state of Indiana. The Rosewater list is renewed every year with new and exciting books and is sponsored by the Indiana Library Federation. Near the end of each school year, teen readers from across Indiana vote for their favorite book from the list, and the winning title is given the Rosewater Award. Voting is online and is currently open, so log on to the Indiana Library Federation website, find the book awards, and vote for your favorite novel. Voting is open through the end of April every school year. Before I officially begin events this evening, I do want to formally thank our sponsors for this festival. Money and support has been provided by the Lilly Endowment for the Arts, the Indianapolis Foundation Library Fund, and Wayne Township Schools to support RosieCon Book Festival. Thank you all for your generous support. Now for our panel tonight. It is called The Therapist is In. We will be talking about mental illness, trauma, addiction, and generally characters who are struggling. Tonight's moderator is Nicole Detter-Smith. She is a school librarian with South Allen County Schools in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Nicole, if you want to turn your camera on, please, that would be great. Thank you for being with us tonight, Nicole, and take it away.
Hello, we're really happy to be with you for the session The Therapist is In, and I'm excited to introduce our authors tonight. If you guys want to stop your video and unmute yourselves, we have Sean Goodman, and we also have Wendelin. And I'm sorry, I've practiced your name and then I mess it up every single time.
It's Van Dronen.
Van Dronen, yeah. Mindy McGinnis. We have Francesca Zappia. And we also have Sandra. And Sandra, I'm just going to have you say your name because I've been practicing and I still feel like I say it wrong. You're still muted.
That's okay. It's Uwiringiman.
You say it so much better than I would. Thank you. Thank you guys all for being here tonight. And what I want to start off with is talking about why you decided to incorporate either mental illness or trauma or addiction into your characters. And if you want to focus in on particular books, you can. It's up to you. I can ask different questions about particular books anyway. But to start off, Mindy, why don't you go ahead and talk about why you include, I just reread a couple of your books over the weekend, and I was really interested in the ways in which you captured, I reread Female of the Species and Madness So Discreet. I was doing some stuff around the house and I was listening to them. Your narrators are fabulous, by the way. And also, I've also read Heroine, and just why did you decide to hit those heavy topics?
So basically, I have always struggled with mental health problems myself, specifically depression, and then anxiety kind of became more of a development later in life. But definitely as a middle school, junior high, high schooler, depression was very much like present for me every day. And then I don't believe I really came to a real understanding of it as depression. I just thought, this is the way I am. I don't understand how other people are happy or even just content, right? Like I feel mild unhappiness all the time, and then sometimes it's overwhelming. So I just thought this was a way of life. I didn't know, because I didn't talk about it, because I thought there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't able to participate in life the way everyone else was and just be content or God forbid, happy. Like that was completely out of my reach, happiness. So I didn't actually come to the realization that I was suffering from depression until I had, I was probably in my mid to late 20s. And a doctor was speaking to me because I had actually developed muscular spasms. And my body, I was so depressed that my body started like acting out, and I would just like twitch. And they didn't know what was going on. And finally, PA said, I think I would like to try something. I would like to put you on an antidepressant. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever had any medication. And, it doesn't fix everything. It's not a cure. But I would feel myself on the cusp of that, getting ready to fall down into that ravine. And I wouldn't. I might go a little bit, but I would come back up. And I was like, oh, this is how normal people feel. Like, this is okay. This is a tenable way to live life. So there's always some element, I think, of me, and I think all authors share in this, in every single one of my characters, even the ones you don't like, even the ones you hate, there's a little bit of me in there too. So just because I went through a fair amount of suffering as a teen with depression, who didn't even realize that it was a mental health issue, I just think speaking out, making it clear, there's help out there, just being honest and talking about it. So there's always elements in all of my books. A lot of it just about speaking out, owning up. Owning up's not really the right way to phrase that, because it makes it sound like you're doing something wrong. You're not, and it's certainly not your fault if you suffer from any type of mental health issue. But specifically, I write about things that perhaps people that haven't experienced it can't necessarily relate to or even find compassion for. And specifically my book Heroin, which is about the opioid epidemic, but we can come back to that. So yeah, I write about mental health fairly often, simply because I don't see it portrayed sympathetically often enough, and typically I see it portrayed erroneously.
You're muted, Nicole.
Sorry, I have to unmute. Thank you very much. Francesca, why don't you then talk about why you chose to incorporate that in your books?
Sure. So I feel like my reasons, I have a lot of the same reasons as Mindy. I'm pretty sure I've had anxiety since I was very small. I remember having what I did not know at the time was a panic attack when I was like 4 or 5, when I like first comprehended what death was and like oblivion. And I had them throughout my childhood, up through middle school, high school, and I just thought that just happened sometimes. Like everybody got that. They just got super scared, couldn't move, couldn't do anything. And then in the past, probably 10 years or so, I've been slowly recognizing like, oh no, you have like severe anxiety, depression. I just recently found out that I have like, it's called moral scrupulosity, OCD, which is not fun. But like, I've also found out, like, gone to therapy, gotten on medication because I'm lucky enough to have the ability to do that. Mm-hmm. And I have realized like, oh, this is what it's like to live without anxiety. And so usually when I incorporate that in my stories, it's to show people like, no, these are real things. These exist. If you feel like this, you're not broken. You're not wrong. There's this thing that's going on with you. And then also to show them that like, it can end or it can get better, because that's my thing. Like I, just as a person in general, I feel like I'm the kind of person who can I can suffer pretty much anything as long as I know that there's an end to it or a lightening of it. And so I know that like when I was at my darkest points, what I needed was really someone to tell me, first of all, just someone to tell me that like, no, this can get better. This can end. And I was like, okay, I can I can do whatever I have to do from now on, knowing that there's an end in sight. So with my books, I want to give that to other people and let them know, like, this doesn't have to be forever. There are things that you can do to make this better. This isn't a death sentence. If you feel terrible, I think that's my main reason anymore for putting it in there.
Awesome. Thank you. I have a young daughter and she's 13 now, but she's been anxious her whole life. And I always thought I wasn't anxious, but if anyone's not anxious after the COVID times, I don't know what's wrong with them. I think we've been on anxiety alert with COVID. And, you know, when I was reading through your books and some of your younger characters, you know, and I see so much of my daughter in there. And after the COVID times, I'm like, oh, this is what she feels like. And it's made me a far more sympathetic person to my students, even who suffer with anxiety.
I've gotten that a lot as well, especially with like Eliza and her monsters, parents telling me that they read it and they understand their kids better, which is another thing that I love whenever anybody tells me that, because that's extremely helpful to an anxious person when other people understand that if they're freaking out about something, don't write it off. Like, try to understand what they're upset about.
Right. It's funny to hear your 7-year-old go, I'm terrified. And I'm like, first of all, I did a good job teaching you vocabulary. And second of all, why? You know, we're just going to school. And then you realize those things. So I really enjoy seeing that in the books with younger characters, so that even when I'm parenting, it gives me a check and I can go, okay, great. You know, this really helps me. And when people ask me why I read so much YA, this is one of the things I tell them. It'll help you be a better parent, you know, if you pay attention. Sandra, I'm going to put you kind of in the middle, simply because you're writing from a nonfiction point of view. So your perspective on trauma is so much different. And I don't know how you're even walking upright, because I could barely make it through the past year. So obviously you didn't really make a choice to incorporate it, but you obviously had to make choices of how much trauma you would incorporate.
Yeah, and honestly, I did make that choice, especially when it comes to talking about mental health, because I come from a culture that's even further, has a longer way to go when it comes to understanding what mental health even is. So even as I was writing the book, I didn't fully understand what I was going through or how to articulate it. I don't have the language for it. And in my native language, we don't have any words to describe mental health or depression or anxiety. There's literally no word for it. And so it was so difficult for me to even process that the reason I was failing all my classes in college and being unable to get out of my bed wasn't because I was broken or that like something else was wrong with me, and that there was like, you're sick, you know, and when you seek help. If you broke your arm, you would seek help. But I couldn't understand. I'm like, what do you mean I'm sick? What do you mean? Because I feel fine physically. I'm okay. And I even had a teacher, like a professor, tell my family that I couldn't have been depressed because I always showed up to class looking good, and I seemed to always be having fun with my friends.
And oftentimes a lot of people do that.
Right. Yeah. So I think it was then that I decided that if I was going to tell my story, I would have to talk about mental health, because in my culture, we still have such a long way to go. And there are a lot of people that are suffering and don't even know it, and can't even articulate it. And so for me, I was really writing for kids like me who live in households that don't even have words to talk about mental health, and hopefully they see themselves reflected. And I think a lot of people did, and I was able to connect with so many people from all walks of life that say, wow, I've definitely felt that way or been in that situation before. It doesn't feel like a choice to talk about mental health when you're talking about trauma and wars and a lot of abuse, but at the same time it is, because you can also talk about those things and not mention the mental health aspect, and a lot of people do, especially for me being African. Like, that's something you don't talk about because then people call you crazy. So it was very important for me to talk about that and to normalize it and to say, yes, I am this person that you are so proud of, this young person that you think has such a bright future, but I'm also this person that's struggling.
Right. And I do think that people, like, we didn't talk about problems in our family growing up. Like, you know, it was the white elephant in the room, but we didn't talk about it. And I think that a lot of people can identify with not being able to fully express themselves to their parents or their siblings, and not having, like, just because we use mental illness or whatever. I identified strongly with you when you were not wanting to talk to your parents about what you were going through in college. And I think that when I talk to kids about your books, that's one of the things that they strongly identify with you about, is that whole not being able to connect with their parents. And they're like, that just is everywhere, I guess. And I'm like, yeah, probably. You know, and I think that's one way too, where we see that we're all the same, you know, in certain aspects. So I liked that in regard to your books. Let's go to you tonight, Wendelin. And why do you choose to write about trauma and addiction?
So it's less like a choice for me and more a reflection of what I know from having been a teacher, and feeling that it's important to incorporate that in stories, not just for the person who experiences something similar, but for the peers, so they can understand better what it is their classmates might be going through, to take a different look at why maybe they're so quiet and withdrawn or moody, or just the various ways that especially teens can kind of hide their depression or their emotions. And I also relate to that because, like, my parents are immigrants, and their work ethic was very, very strong. And it was one of those things where we didn't talk about emotions, we worked. And so we kids were, if we were in trouble, if we were fighting, if we were arguing, any reason, okay, it didn't matter, there was always work to do. And so I learned to be a worker, and I learned to kind of push away the emotions about things through work. And and then becoming an adult, I mean, I continued to just work. That's what I do. And when I feel depressed, I'll go for a run, or I'll do something that will remove me from my emotions. And I think that is why I'm such an emotional writer, is because that's where it opens up. I become this kind of I write about things that I feel in my heart, and that I've seen my students endure or try to manage. And so I try to create characters who reflect that kind of hidden or what we keep to ourselves, you know, that protected emotion. We're afraid to show it because that's going to hurt more often, or we fear that it is. So learning to communicate and learning to let other people into your pain or into your life and what you're thinking and feeling is it can be a very hard thing. And so that's how I came to writing in the first place. I started writing as a way to deal with all this stuff that I was going through as a real life person. And then I became a fiction writer because I discovered that I could take these bad guys in my life, and I could torture them and kill them off. And it became like this joyful escape from reality to write fiction. And then so it became like a natural extension of wanting to deal with the things that like my students were going through and explore those. And really my ultimate goal at the end of any novel is to give a sense of hope that this is something that, like we've talked about, we can get through this. You can find people to support you. Don't give up. Kind of have a hopeful conclusion to that story. And so that's why I do it, I guess. It's just something, it's a natural extension of having worked with teens for so many years and having teens of my own and having been a teen.
Right. Thank you very much, Wendelin. And last but not least, Sean, we're getting to you. And the same question basically is, how do you handle that concept of mental health? And I also am going to combine this a little bit with a question from the audience. And that is, mental health and toxic masculinity sometimes go hand in hand. How do you address that in your book, Kindness for Weakness?
Well, the first part, I don't know that I ever chose to write about mental illness. I work as a psychologist, and right now I work in a big high school. Prior to that, I worked for the state for New York State in the big juvenile detention centers. And most of the kids struggled with mental illness. I think in the girls' center, 90% plus had PTSD. 70% were on, serious psychiatric medications. And so I got to know these kids really well. Some would be there for a year, 2 years, even 3 years. And just hearing their stories and learning about what they were going through, it was this paradox because it was so moving, but the system was really broken and abusive. And it was extremely frustrating to know what to do with all of that. So writing was, I think it served two purposes. One, it was a way for me to process what was going on in my professional life, these things that were happening that were kind of unbelievable to anyone outside of the facilities. And in writing, I could actually control the story. I couldn't control what happened to the kids. I couldn't control what happened when they left and, went home and went back into abusive and neglectful situations or into violent situations. But in writing a story, I could have some control over at least the plot and different aspects. But the other reason is that the kids, especially the girls, kept saying, this is 11 years ago, why are there no books with kids like me in them? And there were a couple, but they were about suburban kids from intact families. And so I had this idea that, somebody should write some books that have characters that these kids can relate to. And it didn't seem like anyone was at the time. So I started, and that's how I came to write my first book. Shortly after that, I moved to a boys' facility, and that's the place that my second book, Kindness for Weakness, was modeled after. And I think the book really is about toxic masculinity, and the main character, who is kind of my version of Holden Caulfield from Catcher in the Rye. I mean, the idea is, what if that character was locked up, instead of hiding out in a Manhattan hotel room? But he's a kind, thoughtful, gentle kid, and he's exposed to all of these different models of toxic masculinity. And he has to survive. He has to figure out, how to survive and who he wants to become. And his big question is, are these the only models? Are these the only options for me? Why is it this or this? And they're both bad. Why can't I be this way? And the interesting thing for me about writing that book is I was in it. and you know, the guard culture was just as limiting and toxic as the culture in which the kids were treating each other badly, jockeying for position and status and things like that. And so, you know, it was like a living experiment, like a living writing experiment. And it was, I don't know, it was a, you know, like a great privilege to be able to write what I was experiencing, and also what I was, you know, what I was really passionate about, because I had these questions when I was younger, and I still have them, and I still, you know, still struggle with these questions in our culture that don't ever really seem to get resolved. And I think the best, the thing that makes me most hopeful is to have lots of different perspectives on it, you know, for kids to be able to um, read and live through different characters, and you know, go outside of themselves and outside of their own experiences.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to combine the next two questions because we're all chatty and we'll run out of time. So the next one is, like, when you're writing about these issues that are important to write about, but can also be tricky to write about, what do you think is important when you talk about these issues? And do you incorporate research when you do it, or do you mostly rely on personal experience? Because I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like everyone, when they incorporate this kind of thing, when they do it really well, it seems like they've looked at it through many different points of view and looked into it, because there's things that they want to make sure they get right. And so how do you do that in your writing, and what do you think is important to do before or to those characters as you're writing? I hope that's clear because I'm combining on the fly. So
yeah, so basically, I mean, I think, like I said earlier, any writer has personal experience and self going into every single character, but research is important. And when we're talking about mental health, obviously all of us have our personal experiences, but depression or anxiety or PTSD, they look different for each individual. So you don't want to just write, you can, of course, write your experience and people are going to relate to that. But I always try to avoid using actual diagnostic terms, because I think if someone reads, so for example, in The Female of the Species, I have my narrator, Alex Kraft, like flat out say, I'm not a psychopath, I'm not a sociopath. Because for one thing, everybody uses those words and very few people know what they actually mean. People use them all the time and they've become pop culture words, and they have lost any actual medical diagnosis. I don't even think psychopath is in the DSM anymore. That could be wrong on the fly right now. But those words don't have any coinage anymore because everyone uses them and no one knows what they mean. So I try, or at least what the differentiation is, I try very hard to not use medical terminology, simply because I also don't want someone to read a character and be, you know, well, that's not anxiety. I must not have anxiety because that's not how I feel. Or I'm not depressed because that's not how I feel. Any experience, any internal experience is deeply personal. So obviously I tap into my own, but also I do so much research. So much. You mentioned earlier my book of madness, so discreet. I researched for 18 months before I wrote a word of that book, because it needed to be right. That and at the same time, you have to realize that you will never be consistently right. So I wrote my book Heroin about addiction and the opioid epidemic, opioids, heroin in particular. And I had so many emails coming from addicts, both functioning addicts and recovered, that were like, man, you nailed it. Thank you for portraying it accurately and sympathetically. And then ironically, the emails that I got where people were like, you don't know what you're talking about, were from parents and loved ones of addicts. Mm-hmm. They were like, no, that's not right. So you're never going to be right. Everyone is just going to come to it, take what works for them, leave the rest, find a better place.
And I really liked how much like help kind of things, especially in heroin in the Midwest with the problems that we seem to have with it, that you put all the help information in there. I thought that was really helpful because sometimes, like you read a book and it resonates with you. Like I read, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on it. One of those anonymous books about the girl who gets addicted to drugs, and why can't I remember the name of that book?
Alice?
Like, what?
Go Ask Alice?
Yes, thank you. I read that in like 6th grade, which was far too young because I was a very young 6th grader. And I just remember that was one of those things that when people were trying to push drugs around, even in middle school, I was like, I don't want to be Alice, So I think that sometimes in fiction, people can get a lot of guidance and or help. So I liked that you included that. And how about you, Francesca?
I mean, I think if you're gonna write about a topic like this, like you have to do research. You can, and if you have those personal experiences, like for sure write about it, because I mean, you're helping yourself as much as you're helping anyone else. And like Mindy said, I mean, you're putting yourself in pretty much everything you write anyway. But you have to do the research for it because there's so many different experiences, and you need to, like, when you're writing about something, you have to understand the pitfalls of it, as well as like, I'm trying to figure out how to put it in words. You have to know what can go wrong in order to avoid it. And even then it's still gonna happen because everybody has different experiences. Everybody is going to feel like, they're gonna feel one way or another about it. Made You Up and Eliza and Her Monsters, both, more with Made You Up, I've gotten readers who said like, thank you for writing this. This feels very accurate to what I have experienced myself. This really helped me see my life in a different way. And then I've had people who, message me and said, this is wrong. Like, you did this so horribly. And they're both valid. Like, when it comes from people who have those experiences, those who felt like it accurately represented themselves, and those who felt like they were not represented, they're both valid. So when you're going into writing something like this, you just have to be aware of that and sensitive to it, and just understand that, like, if you have to do as much as you can to get it right. And then understand that not everybody is going to feel like it is correct. And if you get something wrong, you have to be ready to apologize for it and own up and say, yes, this was my fault. I didn't see this in the right way. I wasn't informed well enough. That kind of thing.
Okay. Sandra, for you, I know, again, you're writing from a personal perspective, but did you have to do research, like as you were writing it, to get, like, you were in the midst of chaos, utter chaos. Did you have to like do research to find out what was happening?
Honestly, mainly about like the historic, I'm so sorry.
You're fine. Bless you.
My bad. Do you mind if I grab some water?
No, go ahead. All right. How about we switch up to you, Wendelin, until she comes back?
Sure. I think research is so important. And I think not having your research show is just as important, so that you don't feel like you're getting a lecture when you're reading a book, and you don't feel like somebody is opening a medical guide and popping things into a story from that. But in order to make it so that it seems very natural as part of the story, there's so much work that goes into getting up to speed about something. So my very first book, there was no research involved because it was basically autobiographical. But every book, as we move farther and farther away from that, probably the only thing that I rely on from like that's is the common thread in a lot of my books is the power of writing as a therapy. And my characters will use writing or poetry or some other way of expressing themselves with words as a form of therapy. But like in a book like The Running Dream, where my main character is in a horrible accident and loses one of her legs, I mean, I didn't know anything about that, but the research that goes into making it authentic, accurate, and not a medical guide is there's a lot of work involved. And you can use terminology or language if an adult professional is talking to your main character, assuming they're a teen. And that's when you get to put in a little of that. But if you put in too much of that, then you know, and the tendency is when you've done all this research, you want to fit it in there. And the best thing for the story is that you don't cram it all in. You just pick and choose the things that give it the sense of authenticity and pull back your desire to fit it all in.
Okay, thank you. All right, Sandra, are you okay now?
I am. I'm so sorry
Okay.
about that.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, I think for me, it wasn't so much about research, especially with the mental health issue, because I was just trying to be as honest as I could about what I was experiencing. I don't even think I fully understood what I was experiencing and going through when I was writing it. I was just starting that journey myself of, you know, seeing a therapist and looking into medication and really understanding what exactly I was dealing with. So I was kind of doing the research. I was going through it, and that was my research, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. All right, Sean, back to you.
I'll be quick. I don't really think much about research. I think I go in the other direction where I'm just trying to, move like in my work. People get really hung up on and fixated on pathology and diagnoses. And so I try and go in the direction of just talking about human moments so when I talk to kids and I ask kids, what books do you like? Why do you like them? What moves you? The thing that comes up more than anything else is that book was real. That book seemed real to me. So when I think about, what does that mean? For some people, it might have to do with, the artifacts of research or technical things. But I think for most kids, it's something that they can connect with and identify with. So I would say, however you get there, it's fine. As long as you get there and it feels real to the reader, to the kid, that's really what matters.
Seems like your profession gives you your research, really, because you've been trained, through your education, and then through your job, you get to get stories.
Yeah. But I have to say that, like when I'm talking with other psychologists or psychiatrists or anyone, that, the thing that makes my eyes glaze over and makes me kind of like pull out of a story or a conversation is when there's a lot of technical stuff. I mean, we really want to read about other people who seem like us in some way, or, we can identify with. And it's hard, it's hard to relate or connect with things. I mean, language is so important, and some of my issues with my own field are the jargon and the sanitized way that we talk about things that are really human things that when you get down to it, everyone understands loneliness and isolation and pain. And so I want to talk at that level and stay there.
Right. That's great. I'm studying neuropsychology, and like I struggle through the technical part to get to the case studies
Yeah.
where you don't have so much, but it's a person's story. And like, that's what gets me through the, blah,
Yeah.
and I have to keep writing down acronyms because I forget what they mean.
Yeah. And I don't think I was honest with that answer, because I do a lot of reading and research. Sometimes I go off the deep end with it. But I don't, I let that stay at the personal level, and I don't really let it carry over into the writing, except in a very general sense.
Yeah, it helps you inform
Yeah.
how you go about it, but it's not like you're going to lecture on it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Very similar to what you said, Wendelin. Okay. Then I have some questions that I'm going from the audience. And I'm going to combine them in a little bit. Someone asked if, excuse me, this crazy year of COVID threw us for a loop. Do you have any advice for young people who may struggle during this time? And I also wondered just advice that you would give to people who are struggling or who write about, these sorts of things, what they should do, kind of lump it all together. I will take notes during this part because I've struggled with the COVID times. I had COVID really bad, and then I've been a long hauler. So like when you have a fever for 6 weeks, you start to get a little wackadoodle, and, being a teacher with it, it's been crazy, like cleaning all the desks between classes and that sort of thing. So, what advice do you guys have? Do you want to do the same order? Or you want me to mix it up? Same order? Okay, go ahead, Mindy.
I think mostly I have like general advice that I've used during COVID has kind of been my advice for dealing with mental health at all times. It's still the same. It's just a little more densely packed, I think. Moment to moment, we're experiencing, I'm from Ohio, so like our Midwestern thing would be like we have cabin fever. And I think that is fairly accurate for where I'm at personally. I always worked from home, and I kind of joked like at the beginning of the shutdown about a year ago that, the world ended and my life didn't change. And what does that really say about me? And I thought it was funny for about 9 months. And then I was like, no, this isn't funny anymore, because I really underestimated how much my mental health depended on being out, being in front of people and talking to them about books, not just my books, talking about books, being with like-minded people in a physical space, seeing their faces. I had an event last night. I had a release yesterday. And so I actually did a small signing in my local indie. So there were about 5 people there. And I texted a friend on the way home. They're like, how did it go? And I was like, you know what? I've been down like the past couple of weeks. I've really been struggling. And I figured out it's because I haven't heard people laugh. I haven't heard laughter. And I haven't been able to like tell some of my stories. Like last night, I was telling them about one of my cats like peed in my crock pot, and I didn't know it. And I turned the crock pot on. You've never smelled a smell like that. You've never smelled that smell. It was amazing. Burning male cat urine. Wow. So it was like, I got to talk about that and see people react and see their faces and hear them laugh. And it was just like, boom, I feel so much better right now. And I'm very fortunate that I get to go in normal times to a lot of panels and do a lot of presentations and like talk to a room of like 200 people. And when you make 200 people laugh, you feel so good, and hearing them laugh and having those like genuine interactions. I haven't had that for a year. And just even having that small connection with 5 people. And like just right now, online connections are real connections. Like Francesca had to bend over when I'm talking about like the cat peeing. Like she had to go off screen to have a laugh. And it's like, that's a real connection. That's awesome. I also substitute in the schools. I'm there pretty frequently. I'm fortunate my gym has remained open. I work out like 4 days a week and I run the other 3. And I just try to maintain the relationships that I have. And I think it's really important right now to really accentuate that online connections and online friends are real friends. They are real people that you are connecting with. And even if you're not hearing their voices or seeing their faces, I have author friends that I talk with every day and online, like in a Slack. And if I didn't have that, this would have been a lot harder.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Francesca.
Yeah, for
Did you
sure.
smell that cat pee?
Mindy.
Yeah.
So I think a couple of things have really helped me in this time. And part of it is just who I am. And part of it is like very lucky / coincidental circumstances, but like I'm an introvert. So while I do, like when I'm in front of crowds, I'm like, oh, just give it to me. I love it. But I'm also totally fine not going anywhere or seeing anybody. But even then, I got to a point where I was like, I can't be in this house anymore. My day job, I do have to go into work, and I do see my coworkers, and we have a daily meeting. So like, I get to talk to them. We get to hang out. That's very helpful. I got to keep that up. And then like, basically almost the entire time COVID's been going, I've been able to go to my boyfriend's house and just hang out with him. And that has been so helpful because it's a different location to go. And
you're actually leaving.
And I'm leaving my house. Yeah, when I'm going somewhere. So like, I've noticed that there are days when it's like, I just need to get in my car and just drive around, go to a park and like sit outside, which is obviously harder when it's the winter and it's cold out. But like going outside really helps. Going to a park, like somewhere that I can social distance from people. And while I do really miss just going and sitting in a bookstore, it is nice to be able to go somewhere. Yeah, the online relationships, like just being able to talk to my friends, like my close friends that I live close enough to go see, friends that I had since high school. We started doing a like video chat every Friday. It was like, okay, for like an hour and a half or so, we're all just going to get together and just talk about our weeks and what we're doing and what we're worried about. And that helped. So it's almost kind of been this rolling process of like, what's going to help me now? Like,
right.
Let's just do a little thing to like, do I just need some fresh air? Do I need to go do a little more exercise? Like just go for a walk. Do I need to text my friend that I haven't talked to in a couple months because he lives in New York? Talk to my other friend who lives in Seattle now. Like, it's like about narrowing down, like focusing on smaller things. And again, that thing that I said earlier, like this is going to end eventually. Just find ways to, piece your way through it if you have to, like whatever you got to do, just take it down low, zen out, take it down low.
My sister is doing her therapy by driving in her car, especially when there's like, in Indiana, it's been real gray. We've had sun the past few days and that's been amazing, but like she lives in Indy too. And like, she'll just get in her car and go drive around her favorite neighborhoods after getting a coffee. And she's like, she works at home and, it's like, I can get out. She's a germaphobe too, like hardcore mental illness kind of germaphobe. And she's like, but I don't have to worry because I'm in my car, I'm by myself, but she sees people and that's good enough for her. Then she goes and gets her groceries delivered,
Mhm.
So, all right, Sandra, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all got thrown for a loop with COVID. I was living in New York City when COVID hit, and I had to move. We were like, my friends and I were closing in on this beautiful apartment, and days before, like literally days before shutdown, they the owner says, "I'm sorry, we can't rent this out anymore due to the ongoing crisis."
Oh my.
And so we were all forced to like move out of the city, which was really unfortunate. And so I moved, stayed with my parents for a little bit, and then my boyfriend and I ended up moving in together in Pennsylvania. So now I live in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and
Oh.
it's not where I imagined my life. And I was extremely disappointed, and my mental health was already in like kind of shambles to be like at the top of COVID, and like having to move out of the city and kind of leaving my comfort zone, because it really has grown to feel like this little comfortable place for me. And I've built a community there. And so leaving all of that was very, very difficult. And here in Pennsylvania, I'm not even close to my family. And I'm a person that really I love being around my family. They re-energize me and remind me why I do what I do in the first place. And so almost all of them got COVID, and I couldn't see them for a very long time. They're all okay now, thankfully. Um, but it was really difficult to hear loved ones struggling and not being able to see them. Um, but thankfully, they've all come out of it. But it definitely threw all of us for a loop. And
For sure.
I think we all just need to remember that we're not alone. And whatever you're feeling, I guarantee you there are so many other people that feel the exact same way. And you can take comfort in knowing that we will be okay. We will get through this. It's gonna be hard, but we are all gonna we're all gonna get through this.
And one day there'll be nice weather and we can go outside again.
Gosh.
Gwendolyn, how about you?
So I had a book come out at the beginning of 2020, and I had resolved that I was going to do as many school visits as I possibly could, and I had my whole like calendar year just because I was so excited about this book and how it could help teens and kids and the teachers who have always wanted to write a book to make progress on that. And it was different than all my novels that I've written, and so it was kind of like this new fresh thing. And so I had all these visits, and they all got canceled. And so that was depressing to me because I was all gung-ho about this book and going out to schools and stuff. Partly I love going to schools because I was a school teacher. And the thing about giving up my day job was that I missed the kids. I mean, I didn't miss the administration. I didn't miss all the red tape that goes into getting anything done. I didn't miss a lot of things about teaching, but what I really
Grading
missed
papers.
yes. What I missed were the kids. And so when you go to a school visit, you reconnect with your audience, the people that you love and that you write for. And so I realized that it wasn't just about going out there and talking about my book. It was just, I missed the kids. And so that withdrawal from seeing those young faces was really hard on me. And so the way that I have been handling this is I make myself go run 3 days a week. I make myself go in the gym because sarcopenia is a real thing. I make myself go in the gym 2 days a week. And it really helps elevate my mood. Running has been that thing in my life that I do for my mental health. And it really does help reset my mood, regardless of how hard it is for me to get out the door. I'm always glad I went when I get back. I know it doesn't work for everybody, and I know it doesn't, it's a temporary thing, but it really has helped me through this. And the other thing was making a resolution to myself that, like, when you look back on this COVID period, what are you going to look back and say, like, so the thing I decided was in my book Wild Bird, which was on the Rosie list, there's this idea about people finding their spark, the thing that's important to them, and then surrounding yourself by people who are willing to be the oxygen for that spark. And so just the notion that I could go out there and be the oxygen for other people's sparks was kind of like what I adopted as my COVID mission. And so people that I've known who have wanted to write books for a long time, I have encouraged them, and I've helped them along their path toward becoming, novelist or whatever. And so that has made me feel like I have purpose, even remotely. And that has really helped me a lot. And of course, there's the escaping into your fictional world that you have created, that you have control over when you have no control over your real world. That's a wonderful space for your mind to be in for, several hours a day. So those are my coping mechanisms.
Okay, thank you. Sean, how about you with COVID? It's got to be hard with your job.
Yeah. For myself, I've got a pretty long list of things that I do that keep me even and in a decent place. But for other people, for kids especially, again, I think it really comes down to loneliness and isolation. And so if that's the big problem, the fix is almost always the opposite of that, which is connection. And so, it's very personal, like what everyone's version of connection looks like that works for them. So I think it's just, it's figuring out what kind of connection is meaningful for a person, and then getting the strength or the drive to come up with, a plan or some concrete ways to make that happen. What I see happening with kids more and more, like at first it was with the kids who were more vulnerable, but now it's with like the strongest kids, the ones who had everything going for them, pre-COVID. And they just withdraw and disengage and isolate, deeper. And so I think the fix is just the reverse of that. But, I tell kids and I tell parents that it's going to take a long time. And so people need to be patient with themselves and need to be kind toward themselves, that it's okay to suffer. Like everybody's suffering, and doesn't mean anything bad about you. It's not a shortcoming. And it's, depending on how long it took a person to get into a very disengaged, withdrawn state, it's likely going to take at least the same amount of time to come out of it. So to give yourself the space and the freedom to do it slowly and in your own way without feeling the need to rush it for the sake of other people. I see so many kids who they're really worried about their teachers and their parents and their friends, and they're letting everyone down by being, sad or depressed. And that's like a whole nother level of difficulty that nobody really needs. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone, our time is pretty much up tonight. I just want to say thank you to all of you here. Nicole and all of the authors, you've honored us with your honesty and your openness, and it's been fantastic listening to you guys tonight. So thank you so much for participating. Let me give a shout out to my tech support, Felina Martinez. She's on the back end audience. You guys can't see her, but she and I are on the backside trying to just make sure everything's running smoothly, and knock on wood, it has run smoothly tonight. So I'm very happy about that. And audience, finally, thank you so much for logging on tonight and participating. I don't know what our YouTube numbers are tonight, but we have a strong showing here on our Zoom support. So it's wonderful, and thank you so much for coming out tonight. Please remember, everyone, that tonight's event is just one in a series for the RosieCon Book Festival. We come on every 2 weeks on Wednesday through the end of April. And so our next panel is going to be on March 10th. And it is going to be all about world building and adventure. So let me bring up the authors who are going to be participating on that. And actually, I think I forgot to share my screen. So hold on a minute. That's okay. I'll just keep talking. So like this panel, you can register for free on the RosieCon website. And everyone, have a good night tonight. Be safe, stay healthy. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.